right. Well, good morning. We'll start right off. There's probably a few more people going to join us, but thank you this morning. Very cold morning, by the way. So if you hear me kind of shivering, it's because my office is really cold today. Um, but we're going to talk about what you need to know before entering into a lease agreement. And sorry, my screen is frozen. Hang on a second. Of course, this happens once in a thing. Hold on just a second. I'm going to stop share and see if I can get this to start again. All right. Give me just a moment and I'm going to see if we can get this presentation. All right, it is moving now. Thank you. And hopefully you can see that. My name is Chris Cole, and I've been with the Maine Small Business Development since 2020. But I've actually been a client of the Maine SBDC for the last 30 years. So I was very, very excited when I got hired to do this job because I had a lot of great mentors along the way help me. And I love to help other business owners like yourself through the process. So the Maine SBDC, we are here to help you start, grow, and eventually sell your business if that's what you want to do. And what we do is we provide no cost confidential business advising. The SBDCs is a national program. It's been around for almost 50 years now. And in the state of Maine, we have locations all over the state and advisors to help you, whether you come in the office or we can do it virtually or over the phone. And the way you sign up for advising, super easy. Just go to mainespdc.org. You click that button, register for advising, and usually within 24 to 48 hours after filling out the form, which only takes about 3 to 5 minutes to fill out, somebody will reach out to you and will get you started. Do want to let folks know that today's webinar is going to be recorded. It's being recorded right now, so you're welcome to shut off your camera. And you will receive in a follow-up email the recording along with the slide decks. Usually that goes out within a week of the presentation. Also, if you would put any questions that you might have along the way into the chat, and then we'll do the questions and answers at the end. So a little disclaimer, the SBDC, we do not provide legal or tax advice. We're not going to take the place of your accountant or your attorney. We're always going to suggest that you get one, strongly suggest that. And with this and all of our webinars, this is just for informational purposes only. So again, I'm going to point some things out in the contracts that I see, commercial leases, that I question, but you're going to want to consult an attorney when it comes to your own lease agreement. Wait, don't sign that. The reason I'm doing this is because I've had, in the short time I've been with the SBDC, clients that have signed up for advising after they signed a lease, and now they're wondering, excuse me, what do I do? Because they didn't realize that it was a 10-year term or that the rent was going up by X amount a year. And now they're not really sure. So just because you love a space and you think it's going to be right, hold off before signing that lease. You know, you really want to review things. And what we're going to do is just discuss some of the terms here, look at the most common leases, and then we're going to go through an example. Leasor, better known as the owner or the landlord, that is the person or the business that controls the property. The leasee or the tenant, somebody who's going to pay rent and occupy the space. It can also be a company, not just an individual. A broker, I always recommend folks contact a commercial real estate broker, whether you're looking to lease or you're looking to purchase commercial real estate. They understand and can help you through the process and working with negotiation, but also searching for space before you even, find something that you like. They're going to help you find the right space for you. And then a real estate attorney, there's someone that has that knowledge, that experience in the law, and really you want to have them get involved when you're talking about any kind of transaction where you're signing a contract. When you start the process, a letter of intent usually is what you're going to start with. So you might see a space and call up, you'll see a sign for lease, you'll call up and say, I'm really interested in this space. What does it entail? You'll receive a letter that might say that it's so much per square foot, how many square feet it is, what the term is that the landlord would be looking for. This is really, it's a non-binding agreement between the two parties, and this is the start of negotiations. And how negotiations work, what lessees are interested in or tenants are interested in, mostly is what you're going to pay per square foot. Who's providing the fit out and how much of it? When can you move in? Parking, that's a big thing, especially in Portland, right? We know if somebody has parking, that's premium. When the rent's going to start, and then what are your options to renew? So if you're going to invest a lot of money in a space, you want to make sure that there are options to renew. You spend $300,000 on a space, excuse me, and it's only good for 5 years. That's a lot of money that you've put out. So options to renew are really important. And what the landlord or the leaser, they're really interested in making sure that the tenant's going to be, what items they're responsible for, getting paid, the fixtures, what's permanent there, what the annual increases are, and the reasons why a tenant, would be evicted. The other terms that we're looking at are the term sheet, and this happens after negotiation. So you've negotiated all of these items, and then basically it's going to be bullet points of everything that you've agreed to. And this is the start to draft the lease agreement. Things within the lease agreement, the base rent. So that's just the price per square foot that you're going to pay. It does not include utilities or other amenities within the space. You'll see that there's going to be other charges that are added above the base rent. And how price per square foot is calculated, it's the square footage times the price divided by 12. So this example here, you're negotiating for $25 a square foot. You have 3,000 square feet. That works out to $75,000 a year paid over a 12-month period. So $6,250 per month would be your base rent. But then you might have CAM or common area maintenance charges. Sometimes I've had people so excited they found a space and it was like $18 a square foot, and that's wonderful. But then the CAM charges may be $4 a square foot on top of that. So that's something that you really want to understand, that is a possibility. TMI, that's not too much information, but it is taxes, maintenances, and insurance. So one of the restaurants that I owned, I was leasing, and I was responsible for 53% of the taxes, because that's the space my restaurant was taking up within this building. I was responsible for all the maintenance within the building, within my portion of it, and to have insurance to cover it. Trade fixtures, that's what you bring to the space with you and that you're going to bring out. So they're not permanent fixtures. And then tenant inducement payments, usually these are incentives. So it's not in the form of a kickback, especially not in this real estate market. But back in the early 2000s, it was, landlords actually were paying back people to come and rent their space initially. But usually how you see it is you might have a 3-month grace period to move in. That would be a tenant inducement. And then leasehold improvements, that's a budget that, or an allowance that the landlord gives the tenant to be able to make improvements. This happens when a space may have been rented for, 10 or 20 years by another business, and it now needs updates. And the landlord is going to allow you to make those improvements that fit your business, and they're going to give you an allowance to do it. Subleasing. This is important if you are the type of business, let's say that you have like a holistic healing or health business, and you want to be able to lease spaces within that space. So maybe you rent a space that has like 3 or 4 rooms in it. You want to be able to rent to like a Reiki healer or massage therapist or somebody who does acupuncture. This is a clause where you have to put in, that you want to allow subleasing. Usually it says subleasing is not allowed without written consent. So that's something you would negotiate ahead of time. Exclusivity. This is really important in commercial leases when you're in a smaller space. So if you're in a strip mall, you might want to be the only nail spa, hairdresser, gym, business like that, so that you're not competing with the other tenants in the building. You don't want to be in a small space where there's 3 of the same thing. So you can ask for exclusive rights to conduct your business. A security deposit, everybody knows what that is, but in commercial real estate, there is no standard. So this is written into your contract. So for instance, if the rent is $6,000 a month and the security deposit is equal to 3 months, let's say, that's $18,000 up front. An item I certainly would negotiate would be the security deposit. And if the landlord wasn't willing to budge, I would probably negotiate paying that over a certain amount of time instead of all of that money up front. Clauses. So if there's not enough with those terms, we also have a bunch of clauses that work into it. And rent escalation. Rent escalation traditionally was based on COLA, or the cost of living increases, which worked great for many, many years because that averages about 2.5% to 3% a year. However, in 2022, COLA went up 8.5%. And I actually had a client whose lease agreement was based on the cost of living adjustment, and they really had no recourse. Luckily, the landlord that they were dealing with was reasonable, but legally they had signed this contract. So I personally would not have something tied to a number that was kind of incontrollable. So you don't know how that's going to work out. Use, that's basically saying that you want to be a gift shop and that's what you're going to use it for. And by year 2, if you change to a gym, the landlord's probably not going to approve that. Insurance. This is something that not only protects you, but protects the landlord. And you'll see in many lease agreements that the landlord is also named as additionally insured. And this means that they have the same rights to that policy as the tenant does, but they're not paying for the policy. The other thing when it comes to insurance is a landlord might set your deductible and say your deductible can't be more than $2,000 or $5,000. Like you can't have a high deductible, and that's to make sure that they'll be able to recoup the claim. Another thing is renewal. So the options to renewal, usually you're going to see in a contract, and we're going to look at one that shows a 30-day in writing option to renewal. Profit sharing, you don't see a lot of that these days, but in common spaces. So for instance, I was in a business in the Portland public market many years ago, and our rent was a base rent, plus we had profit sharing above so many transactions. So I can't remember, I think it was maybe 12,000 a month in sales. Anything above that, the Portland public market got a percentage of those sales. And when you're talking about a food business whose margins are really slim, profit sharing can be tough. I deal with people that have food trucks and food trailers, and certain venues they go to actually take like 20% profit sharing. So you really need to know your numbers before you sign something that says profit sharing. Damage, just like it sounds, if you cause damage, you're responsible to fix it. Lots of times the landlord will say in there that it has to be somebody of their choosing to do the repairs. So your cousin Bill just can't come and redo the sheetrock or the plumbing. They're going to say that it has to be a licensed contractor. And then several abilities. So we see this a lot. And this means that if one portion of the lease is ruled invalid in the court of law, the rest of the lease is still binding. So it doesn't get you out of the lease agreement if you find a loophole. And what types of property are out there to rent, or what states are you going to see them in? Anything from turnkey to new build. So turnkey is how it sounds. And that means everything's in place, it's ready to go. All you have to do is open the front door and you're ready to go. And we see this in buildings that maybe a restaurant was there for years and years, and the people who own the restaurant still own the building. They don't want to run it anymore. But everything's in place, so you can come in and start right from there. Vanilla box, that is something that includes all the rough-in plumbing, and usually the landlord will give you a budget to do like the flooring and the light fixtures as well. And then the cold dark shell, this has no amenities. It's right down to the studs. You have to put in everything from the heating to the plumbing to the electrical. But the rent for that would be considerably less than, let's say, a turnkey. Second generation leases, that's where something that was already there. And we're starting to see that now with breweries. So maybe a brewery was already in a space and they've left and a new brewery comes in. So it has about everything that you would need legally to pass code and all of that. It's pretty much ready to go. Just put your own equipment in there. And a new build, this is where you can design it right from the ground up. And you'll see that a lot of times where there'll be a sign on a piece of property on the side of the road, that says build to suit. This outlines everything that would be included in a commercial lease agreement. Excuse me, and I'm not going to go through it all. There's everything from, who's named on it to how you're going to settle your disagreements. Again, really want to make sure that you read every single item and understand it. And the most common lease agreements that we see, I'm just going to go through the three most common. Triple net, I see a lot of that now. And that means that it doesn't include anything. The only thing the landlord is responsible for is the roof and the exterior walls. That's about what it comes down to. Then we have the modified gross lease. And, this means that some of the things are covered by the landlord. Other things are covered by the tenant above the base rent. And the last one is the full service gross lease. And this is in a space where probably the utilities can't be separated, and maybe an older building. Could also be a new construction, but typically we'll see it in an older building. Sometimes it's in a building where maybe the landlord had their business or still does, in a portion, and when they started, just made sense to have everything joint. So these, they're going to be a little more expensive than a triple net you would expect, because it covers everything, including taking care of outside areas. Another option for folks is co-working spaces. So some of the, sorry about that, it just skipped ahead. Some of the co-working spaces we see, these actually started in the mid-90s, and they're pretty popular because they're flexible. They give people the option to enter 24 hours a day, but also it has the furniture you need, Wi-Fi. It might have a virtual office assistant, so it might actually have somebody there that can answer phone calls for you or act as a receptionist, a place that your mail can be received. conference rooms, things like that. Other amenities include, everything from coffee and snacks to beer on tap. Some spaces offer that. And if you're a food business, one of the best co-working spaces is Fork Food Lab in South Portland, and that's a subscription base. So people pay for that space based on the number of hours that they intend to use it. You become a member of that. So these are some other options besides leasing. All right, this is my little break in between all of my talking, just to mentally reset. These are my dogs and my cats cozying up on a probably cold day like today. We'll move on to the commercial lease. This here is triple net, says it right up top. But right from the beginning of this lease, and this is one where I saw this after the fact that the person signed this, but it says lease premises are accepted as in condition. And that the tenant acknowledges that the landlord has made no representation. The tenant's not relying on the landlord for representation. And in particular, the tenant has conducted its own due diligence. So that means making sure that you've talked to the code enforcement officer, making sure that, the fire department's been in on this. Any of the requirements that you might need for your business, that is this going to work here, right? So all of those things really need to be figured out before you ever sign this lease. Should have never signed this lease, because the landlord basically was like, well, you were supposed to do your own due diligence. And excuse me. So you want to make sure that you do all of your inspections before signing a lease when you see a clause like that right in the beginning. Other items here are the rent increases. So this spells it out for the 10-year lease. The highlighted rents, that's what I found really interesting. So I would rather have, a 2 to 3% increase every year, but we go from years 4 to year 7, and it increases almost 30%. It's like 8% per year over those years. So again, have you budgeted for that? Does it make sense? Can you negotiate that before you even sign the lease? Something I would negotiate for sure. Then, excuse me, as far as paying rent, this spells out, that there'll be a 4% late fee, and the landlord has a right to collect that. And then the renewal option here, in this case, the tenant needs at least 60 days prior to say in writing that they do want to exercise their options. And below, it would spell out what the next 10-year term would be. And then this one also says what the security deposit is. In this case, it's the amount of 1 month's rent, which is pretty decent. And then tenants alterations. So if you see this here, it says the tenant doesn't have the right to alter anything, but they had typed in build out as agreed to. So there's probably a pendency to this that spells out exactly what the tenant's going to do to make it fit what they need to do. Subletting, again, we talked about that. It's basically you can't sublet without having it in writing. And then when it comes to quiet enjoyment, if a tenant has done everything that they're supposed to do, lived up to their end of it, they should be able to be entitled to use the premises without any hassle from the landlord, basically. And then the landlord's access. They're saying that that's in reasonable times during the term of this lease. I would think that a judge would probably say reasonable, probably between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Those would be reasonable times. But the landlord also makes sure in this portion that if repairs need to be done, they can't be inhibited from making the repairs. And that's to their discretion, meaning the landlord's discretion. So a lot in this lease really is favoring the landlord and the landlord's rights. including the indemnification. So when it comes to that, excuse me, if you can see section A, the tenant is basically indemnifying the landlord against anything whatsoever, including weather or if pipe sparks. It's a lot, right? Very, very much detail in here. Adversely, the landlord indemnifies the tenants. However, this is only if it's caused solely by the gross negligence or the willful misconduct of the landlord. So that language like that means that you will have to prove that the landlord knew that there were issues and didn't do anything about it. That's when, in this case, the landlord would indemnify the tenant. Brokerage. And again, we talked about in the beginning, getting a commercial broker to help you with this. The landlord is stating here, that you as the tenant has not dealt with another individual, or broker, anybody concerned with the leasing process. And this is really because the landlord is paying, in this case, their broker the full percentage. And so that percentage that commission is not going to be shared. And again, this is something where I look at that and stop. And if you have been dealing with a broker, you really need to be transparent. It probably would be long before you were signing a lease agreement that it would be known, because your broker would be hopefully part of the negotiation process before you got to the lease agreement. So you wouldn't sign this, you'd probably X that out of it. The bottom is really, really important, the disclaimer. This is a legal document, and if it's not fully understood, consult an attorney. Again, in this person's case, this is something where they should have not signed it, consulted an attorney, because I don't think they totally understood what they were signing at the time. And guarantee. So like I said in the beginning, as a business owner, you can have your business be the tenant, but typically a leaser or a landlord, they're going to want a personal guarantee. And this means that no matter what, if your business fails for whatever reason, if the business goes bankrupt, you are still personally liable for all the conditions of the lease. So if you signed a 10-year lease and you can't perform your business in that 10 years, you are still responsible for that lease agreement. I would be very, very leery of signing a guarantor agreement because you waive a lot of your rights, and the landlord can go after you personally for the money that's owed. So that leads to when to hire a real estate attorney. I would say from the start, for the most part, unless it's really a straightforward lease agreement, it's very, very clear. Hire somebody right at the get-go. If you have any questions whatsoever, if it's a long-term lease, and in particular when disputes arise. So anything comes up, and you're definitely going to want to consult an attorney before trying to go it alone or making a bad agreement for yourselves. Long, long before you get to a lease agreement, before you find that space, you need to do your due diligence, do your planning, and that's what we're here for, right? You want to make sure that your business is going to succeed. You have the money that you need, you've done your financial projections, you know what your budget is, and you've met with an advisor. And whether it's us or the Maine Women's Business Center or SCORE or VBOC, we're all here to help. We all work together for your success. But you definitely want to meet with an advisor so that will be smooth part of your business when you sign a lease agreement.